On a cold January night in 1980, the quiet suburban streets of Evansville, Indiana, were cloaked in an eerie stillness. Families nestled inside their warm homes, the soft glow of their televisions flickering against frosted windows. But as the town settled in for another ordinary evening, an unthinkable nightmare was about to unfold inside the Gilligan household. Patrick and Teresa Gilligan were the embodiment of the American dream. Patrick, a dedicated attorney, and Teresa, a loving mother, had built a life filled with warmth, love, and laughter. Their two young children, Lisa and Greg, were the heart of their world. Innocent, full of wonder, and blissfully unaware of the danger lurking just outside their door. That night, as they went about their usual routine, an ominous presence loomed nearby. Donald Ray Wallace Jr., a career criminal with a history of burglary and violence, had chosen the Gilligan home as his next target. Fueled by desperation and an insatiable greed, he was prepared to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. Wallace had been prowling the neighborhood, casing homes for an easy score. The Gilligans, with their welcoming porch light and cozy interiors, seemed like any other unsuspecting family. He had broken into homes before, stolen valuables, and left quietly into the night. But tonight would be different. Tonight, the stakes were higher and the consequences unimaginable. As he approached the house, the cold metal of his handgun pressed against his palm. He had no idea that this would be the crime that would define the rest of his life. He slipped in through an unlocked entrance, his breath steady, his movements calculated. He had done this before. Inside, he moved swiftly through the rooms, taking whatever caught his eye: jewelry, cash, electronics. But just as he stuffed a handful of valuables into his pockets, he heard something that made his blood run cold. The unmistakable sound of a garage door opening. Panic surged through him as he realized the Gilligans had returned home. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, his mind racing for a way out. But there was none. He was trapped. Patrick Gilligan stepped inside first, his tired eyes adjusting to the dim light. Within moments, he sensed something was off. A shadow moved. Before he could react, Wallace emerged from the darkness, gun raised, his voice a sharp command. Don't move. Teresa clutched her children, her body trembling as she took in the horrifying scene. Their warm, familiar home had been transformed into a battleground. Wallace forced them into the living room, tying their hands, his nerves fraying. He hadn't planned for this. He never intended for them to see his face. And now, there was only one way out. The air inside the house grew suffocating, thick with dread. And then, in the blink of an eye, the night turned to chaos. A sudden movement, a desperate attempt to break free, and then a gunshot rang out, shattering the silence. And just like that, the Gilligans' peaceful life was over. As the Gilligan family settled into their routine on that cold January night, they had no way of knowing that their home was being watched. The intruder lurking outside their residence wasn't a random thief. He was Donald Wallace Jr., a seasoned burglar with a history of violent crimes. Wallace had spent days scoping out their neighborhood, looking for the perfect target. And now, under the cover of darkness, he crept toward the Gilligan home, his heart pounding with anticipation. Donald had one goal that night: to rob the house and make a quick escape, armed with a handgun and a knife. He pried open a window, slipping inside without making a sound. The family was asleep, unaware that danger had just entered their home. He moved swiftly through the rooms, gathering valuables, jewelry, electronics, and cash, carefully placing them into a duffel bag. But as he crept through the hallway, he heard a noise that made him freeze in place. It was the sound of a door creaking open. Patrick Gilligan, a devoted father and husband, had woken up to get a glass of water. As he stepped into the hallway, his eyes adjusted to the darkness. And that's when he saw the shadowy figure. For a split second, both men stood motionless, staring at each other. Then, in an instant, Patrick lunged at the intruder, trying to wrestle the gun from his grasp. The struggle was violent and chaotic. Patrick fought with everything he had, his instincts kicking in to protect his family. But Donald was ruthless. He struck Patrick with the butt of his gun, sending him crashing to the floor. The noise awoke Teresa, who ran out of the bedroom, only to be met with a terrifying sight: her husband bloodied and groaning on the ground, and a stranger standing over him, a gun in his hand. Teresa's scream pierced the night, waking the children. Their bedroom doors swung open, and they ran out in confusion, only to be met with a horrifying scene unfolding before them. Donald knew that he had lost control of the situation. He had come here for money and valuables, but now he had been seen. His face was no longer a secret, and in his mind there was only one way out. Without hesitation, he lifted the gun and pulled the trigger. The first shot rang through the house, followed by another, and then another. In the blink of an eye, the Gilligan family's warm and safe home became a crime scene soaked in terror and bloodshed. As the echoes of gunfire faded, Donald stood in the eerie silence of what he had just done. His pulse was racing, his breath ragged. He had planned for a quick burglary, but now he had crossed an irreversible line. He was no longer just a thief, he was a killer. But what he didn't realize was that he had left behind something crucial, something that would ultimately lead the police straight to him. As investigators pieced together the events leading up to the murders, they found themselves staring into the dark abyss of Donald Wallace Jr.'s criminal mind. His behavior after the killings was as disturbing as the crimes themselves. Instead of laying low, he seemed to revel in his actions, treating stolen items like trophies, parading them around as if he were untouchable. The arrogance, the recklessness, it was all adding up to the profile of a man who believed he was above the law. But law enforcement was closing in. Debbie, the woman who had once cared for Donald, was now a key player in unraveling his sinister deeds. After discovering stolen valuables in her home, including jewelry and cameras linked to the victims, she realized the full extent of the horror she was involved in. Though fearful of what Donald might do if he suspected her cooperation, Debbie made a fateful decision. She handed over evidence to police, including a pair of jeans, a ring, and a glove. It was these very items that would prove to be his undoing. When forensic experts analyzed the jeans, they discovered microscopic traces of type AB human blood, the same blood type as Teresa Gilligan and one of her children. This was irrefutable proof that Donald had been present at the scene of the crime. The ring, which he claimed was a gift from a jeweler, was soon identified as belonging to Teresa's mother, a local jeweler who had resized the piece years prior, still had photographic records proving its origins. Then came the glove. The analysis revealed that the fabric was stained with type B blood, the same blood type as Patrick Gilligan. Investigators now had physical evidence linking Donald to the crime in multiple ways, further tightening the noose around him. But he wasn't going down without a fight. As police ramped up their search, Donald seemed to always be one step ahead. He had an uncanny ability to vanish just as authorities arrived, leading some to believe he had an informant tipping him off. On January 15th, law enforcement received a tip that Donald had been seen in Newburgh, Indiana, hiding with friends. Officers moved quickly, hoping to catch him off guard. But once again, he was gone. Donald's so-called friends confirmed that he had been there, but had left abruptly, claiming he needed to find Debbie. Fear and paranoia were beginning to consume him. He knew that his time was running out, and the walls were closing in. The police were relentless. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and soon there would be nowhere left to run. Just when it seemed like another day of searching would end in disappointment, the phone rang at the police station. On the other end was a local man named Bob Ashworth. His voice was urgent, his tone serious. He told officers that he had seen a man climbing into the attic of a nearby house, someone who seemed to be hiding. Given the many false leads they had received, the officers hesitated. Was this just another wild goose chase? But something in Bob's voice told them otherwise. They had no idea that what they were about to uncover would lead to one of the most intense and nerve-wracking moments of the entire investigation. Donald Wallace Jr. had spent years behind bars, his name becoming synonymous with cold-blooded violence and legal battles. Despite his initial claims of innocence, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The blood-stained jeans, the stolen jewelry, the haunting confession letter. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. Donald had mercilessly slaughtered an entire family. Yet, even with his conviction and death sentence, Wallace was not done fighting. Over the next 2 decades, he would become a relentless figure in the court system, appealing his case at every turn. His lawyers argued that his childhood trauma, drug addiction, and supposed schizophrenia should exempt him from the death penalty. Others saw his legal maneuvers as nothing more than desperate attempts to delay the inevitable. One of his most dramatic stunts came in the early 1990s when he attempted a hunger strike, vowing to let himself waste away rather than face execution. But prison officials intervened, force-feeding him when his health became critical. Whether it was a genuine act of defiance or another ploy to manipulate the system, it became clear that Wallace feared death far more than he ever feared taking the lives of others. As the years passed, the Gilligan family's relatives remained steadfast, ensuring that the wheels of justice did not stall. Teresa's sister, Diana Harrington, became a fierce advocate for victims' rights, fighting tirelessly to keep Wallace's death sentence intact. She refused to let the memory of her sister, brother-in-law, and their children be overshadowed by the man who took their lives. Then, in 2005, after more than 2 decades of legal battles, the end finally came. Wallace, exhausted from his fight, made a stunning decision. He would not pursue any further appeals. In a final statement, he admitted to the killings, something he had avoided for over 20 years. He wrote letters expressing regret, claiming that he was no longer the deranged dope fiend he once was. But for the victims' loved ones, remorse meant little. The pain he had inflicted could never be undone. On March 9th, 2005, at 12:23 a.m., Donald Wallace Jr. was executed by lethal injection at the Indiana State Prison. His last meal was steak, a baked potato, soup, and chocolate truffle cake. He declined a spiritual advisor. His final words were brief but chilling. "I hope everyone can find peace with this." For the Gilligan family, however, true peace could never be found. Their lives have been stolen in the most violent and senseless way imaginable. No punishment, no execution could ever bring them back. Even now, the echoes of that tragic night linger. Had Donald Wallace never walked into that home, the Gilligans would still be here. They would have celebrated birthdays, milestones, and new generations. Instead, their story was cut short, forever a painful reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most ordinary of faces. What do you think? Now, I want to hear from you. Did Donald Wallace get what he deserved? Do you think justice was truly served, or did his execution come too late? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into true crime. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.